Hello everyone, how's it going? My name is Elias, and in today's video I'm going to be bringing you guys my October wrap-up, aka my monthly wrap-up plus some recent reads over the past 2-3 months. By now, I have a total of around 10-ish books I want to talk about. So before we get into any of the books, I would like to take a moment to thank today's video sponsor, Redbubble. Redbubble and I have been friends for quite some time now. They are big supporters of this channel, and every single collaboration that we've been working together on have just been the complete best. So Redbubble is essentially perfect in every way for all of your gifting needs. All of their items range from like coffee mugs, coasters, posters, t-shirts, sweaters, hoodies, prints, postcards, everything, anything, you name it, they have it. There are a ton of gifted and talented artists on there who upload their work, and some of their designs are just incredible, insanity. I can never. I'm actually collaborating with Redbubble for their fall campaign. Fall is a great and fantastic season, and what better way to embrace the autumnal spirits than fall decor? Redbubble is fantastic. I actually use it all the time in my daily life and even gifted a bunch of friends from the items that I got from there. Alright, so for this campaign, I actually went out and chose some fall items, decor that I felt sort of like fit that vibe. And so the first couple of things, of course, t-shirts. You can never go wrong with the t-shirts from Redbubble, and literally, I kid you not, half of my t-shirt collection is all from Redbubble. Next up, I got these black Wicked coasters because you can never go wrong with coasters. Of course, you can never go wrong with more prints, especially these witchy looking ones. I also got my second metal print from Redbubble. I think it's really cool. It's giving me Ronan Lynch, Ronan vibes. If you know, you know. And last but not least, a festive apron for the seasonal holidays. Those are all the items that I chose for this campaign. I also have a link and code where you can get 15% off. Everything will be linked down below, and thank you once again to Redbubble for sponsoring today's video. Alright, with that being said, let's go ahead and get straight into the books. Alright, first up, I think I read this at the end of August, and this is Soul Taken by Patricia Briggs. This is the 13th book in the overall series of the Mercy Thompson universe, and again, Patricia does not disappoint. So if you're looking for a super great, solid fantasy romance, paranormal, urban fantasy series to start off with, I think I have reread each book by now at least 2 to 3 times, and it's essentially my guilty pleasure in terms of like comfort reads. Every single time I'm deciding whether or not what to read or in a reading slump, I just take a book out in this series, read a passage or so and skim through it, and voila, slump cured. There's just something so comforting and just inviting about this whole series overall. If you're looking to get your supernatural fix in terms of like werewolves and vampires and just all the other supernatural creatures and mythology in terms of like that field and genre, then look no further because this series pretty much has it all. So this one follows Mercy, our main character of all 13 books, who can shapeshift into a coyote. And what you guys gotta know is that each book, even though there is like sort of like an overarching story and theme to them, they all are sort of like episodic in terms of like dealing with like different god or different mythology or a supernatural creature. And this one is no different because it follows her adventure dealing this time with sort of like the Grim Reaper. I just thought the whole idea and the premise was so fascinating along with the story. If you really like the trope of like found family, then look no further. And so in the end, I gave this one like 4 out of 5. It was just really great being back into this world and all the characters again. So, alright, so the next book that I read is Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died. This one was so unexpected because I don't think I've ever read a memoir written by a celebrity before. Celebrity, okay? I grew up watching iCarly when I was a kid, and Sam was like literally one of my favorite characters. And so reading about it now, I didn't really know what to expect, right? However, the title itself really pulls you in, right? Before going into it, I heard inklings here and there how great it was. It was just fantastic, unlike any other memoir people have read before. And so I was like, okay, well, I didn't really have anything to compare it to. So I went into it listening to an audio, and the audiobook is just out of this world just because it's also narrated by Jeanette herself. So Jeanette has a really good knack, this structure in terms of like storytelling and just recalling flashbacks and memories when she was a kid, getting into like a child acting business, and largely in part her relationship with her mother, who was essentially the pillar for a lot of the things in Jeanette's life and not all of them good. This book also had lots of triggers, more than I actually anticipated. So with that in mind, I absolutely adore this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I cried at some parts, I laughed at some parts, and overall it was just really well written and it was a really great memoir. So definitely recommend, but just be mindful of the triggers. So, alright, so the next book is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. This one was very interesting just because after reading Piranesi, right, I had actually several people comment saying that if you really liked Piranesi, you will like Sea of Tranquility. At the time, I didn't really know what to make of that comparison, and I was like, I don't really see the comparison. Like, where is it? How? From this book to my all-time favorite god tier book of all time, Piranesi, after which my cat was named after, right? However, upon thinking about it and contemplating, I do see it sort of in the way on how it's sort of similar to Piranesi. But I think it's easier for you to experience it yourself reading Piranesi and reading Sea of Tranquility to get those comparisons, because I don't know, I feel like it's more of vibes and feelings more so than actual physical comparison. I mean, those are just my thoughts in comparison when reading both books. So this book in of itself is somewhat really strange. It's so random, I want to say. It's also very short as well. This is my first book that I'm reading from Emily. I heard that her other book, I want to say The Glass Hotel, should be read first before going into this one. But I didn't do that, and I guess you can say there were some elements in this book that were spoiled, but it is what it is. This one is a little tricky to explain because it's about these 3 distinct POVs and how they all accumulate together in terms of a sound that they all hear, and how they all accumulate and come together and associate with each other with this same event that triggers a different sound for each. One person in like the early 1900s hears like this violin sound, while someone in the year 2090 or something hears another sound at an airport, and so on and so forth. And so we follow these 3 characters very briefly at that, while centralizing on a single main mysterious character that is somehow associated with all of these characters. And so that's pretty much what I'm going to leave at. I feel like this is the type of book where the less you know, the better it'll be. And so that is all I'm going to leave at. I really loved it. I really liked the writing and just the premise, the overall premise in of itself. With that in mind, a really strong 4 out of 5. So the next book that I read and completed is Babel by R.F. Kuang. Alright, so this was the Late Night Book Club's pick, and while Joel and Noel, I think they both gave it 4, 5 out of 5 stars. However, I was giving it sort of close to a 2 or 3-star read. So you pretty much already know the hype this book has gone. And I think my expectations for this book were an all-time high. I've actually only read one book from R.F. Kuang, which is The Poppy War, and I gave that book 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was okay, I didn't really like it, and I never continued on with the series. However, contrast to my love for this book, everyone else has essentially put that trilogy on a pedestal and has proclaimed a ton of love for it. And hey, that's totally fine, right? Everyone has their own opinions. However, just because of the hype for those books, and just the hype in general for this one, I got excited, right? However, going into this one, very disappointing. I was told that this book is sort of like a high fantasy set in the real world regarding magic with dark academia, entropy, and languages and all that, and so I was really looking forward to it. It sounded so good. However, the magical fantasy aspect in this book is so minimal. I feel like it was only used in a way to explain the cause of how magic can be used in this book. Like, we were given the bare minimum of the how and the why magic is sort of introduced and used in this book, but never fully explained. I mean, that is just one of the things that I really like about it. Another thing is that there's so much telling rather than showing. So in the middle of the book, which in my case is pretty much the worst part of the book, there's just so much repetition, repeating, and telling in terms of what these students are doing. I feel like if you cut maybe 100 to 200 pages of this book out, I think it would be a much stronger book, and you can still retain all the information with everything that has happened without losing anything. I also felt like sometimes when the main characters would speak, it would feel really modern and really forced, very Twitter-like, if you will. And in terms of like getting their point across, there were so many times, so many instances where they would say the exact same thing, but in different ways. Also, there are a ton of footnotes in here, and I think like halfway through, I just entirely gave up, skipped through it and skimmed through it, because to me, they felt like definitions or brief descriptions explaining like a phrase or an event that happened. While I guess that could be intriguing to some, to me it just felt overtly pretentious and not in a good way. I mean, dark academia in general is pretentious, and the characters are also pretentious as well. And in some cases, that aspect sort of elevates the character in the story, but in this case, I think it hinders it. Also, the characters in this book, I think, were the weakest as well. We were never really given any development to these characters, so it made it rather difficult for me to even care about these characters in the first place. And so we have our main character, Robin, and his friends, and that relationship, their dynamics with each other. We're really supposed to care about it, to thrive on those relationships. However, our main character, passive as he was, offered no other insight or nuance to his other friends, other characters. So in that way, I could not care for anything at all, which is kind of bad because you're supposed to, and these characters take up like 80% of the book. Yeah, honestly, this book had no plot, barely any vibes. I mean, very strong beginning, but such a weak middle and a lackluster ending. But ultimately, I thought it was really underwhelming. I was disappointed, but I can see why and how people love this book as much as they do. I mean, you can watch all of our thoughts, our opinions, and discussions regarding this book in a last show. I'll leave it linked down below. So before we finally get into the other books, into the final books that I read, I just want to briefly go over the book that I'm reading right now, and that is The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So this is the last book in the trilogy of the Inheritance games, and let me just say, it has been a rather mild and forgettable ride, in my opinion. I honestly forgot everything that has happened in the second book. I really did enjoy the first book, and I'm like, what, 40 pages into the last and final book right now. I actually had to go online and read several summaries and recaps of what happened in the second book, and I gotta say, I'm still only halfway there on remembering who these characters are, even caring which character is who, or even what happened, because I strongly believe this trilogy would have been stronger if it was a duology. So much of the second book could have been like cut out, and I'm wondering, upon completing this one, if I'll feel the same. We'll see how this goes. I know that the series in general is very popular on Book Talk, and I can see why. It's enjoyable, there's a love triangle, and speaking of the love triangle, I honestly could care less which brother the main character ends up with. I know that the fandom in of itself is very strongly opposed to this one character. I'm not going to say who, just in case you haven't read it yet. And so far, I honestly don't care, and the mystery itself is very lackluster. But yeah, just gonna wait and see how this book ends, but hopefully for the better. Finishing out strong. Alright, last but not least, we have 6 books, all pertaining to the same series that I have read and completed, and it is the Hidden Legacy series by Leona Andrews. I actually only have 3 of the books that I read physically with me, and the other 3 I read on Kindle on my phone. So the Hidden Legacy series is another underrated urban paranormal fantasy romance series. That was a lot, but honestly, do not let these covers, these ugly, atrocious covers, fool you. Okay? These seem like the type of books you would see in like a romance section at like Walmart's or CVS and whatnot. You know, when you go to the local grocery store and they have like a small selection of books and they're all like mass market paperbacks, like thrillers and mysteries and whatnot. But these covers don't do the books justice at all. Like the original covers for the first trilogy is even worse than this one. Okay, this is the spinoff, right? Like these are the type of books I would not take out to read with me in public, okay? But literally, overall, the characters, the world building, and the story itself, it is just chef's kiss. So good. Honestly, unlike anything I've ever read before. It's honestly really unique in the fact that it's sort of like Harry Potter meets X-Men. And so while this is a spinoff, I actually would encourage you guys to go ahead and read the original trilogy first. So what really makes it really unique is that in this world, there are houses that goes by the family last name. And how these houses differ with each other is that there are different hierarchies in which stems from the different abilities and powers that these houses possess. And so we follow our main character who isn't part of any house. She just lives with her family. She lives with her sisters, her mother, her grandmother, and her cousins in a regular family but undeclared house where they run an investigative business. And so we follow our main character who has the ability to tell when people are lying. How she utilizes this ability and how it progresses throughout the novel is so fascinating, so interesting to read about. Most of the abilities and how magic is processed in this book is just so intriguing. Like some of the abilities that her sisters have, won't spoil anything, won't say anything, but it gave me goosebumps and a thrill of excitement when I first read about them because I was like, that is so fucking cool. So all in all, she's basically a lie detector and she gets pulled into a case in which she investigates that involves really dangerous and powerful people in different houses. And so that's all I'm gonna say, but it's a very great series. I would highly definitely recommend it. I would say the spice level is pretty much on par with Sarah J Maas. And speaking of Sarah J Maas, I feel like if she ever wrote an urban paranormal fantasy series set in the real worlds, this series would be those books. I think I reread the first original trilogy like 3-4 times by now, and so that is my sentiment on the whole series itself on why you should read it. So alright, and so that is pretty much it for this wrap up. Please let me know down in the comments below if you have read any of these books or what other books you recommend. I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you all soon with a new video. So the Hidden Legacy series and underrated urban paranormal. The Hidden Legacy series, I think, is another underrated urban paranormal fantasy paranormal romance. Did I use the paranormal word twice? Yes, I did. But these covers don't do, but these covers